Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Sheltered Sages. Sorry, I was going to do it. What are we? A show? The podcast?
We're a podcast.
We're a podcast, aren't we?
Yeah.
The podcast where two formerly sheltered homeschool students go and explore the weird, chaotic side of the world, one Reddit story at a time.
I like that.
I am Andrew.
I am Philip, and that was a nice riff. I like that.
I will try. That was rough. But anyways, all that to be said. Well, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us again for another episode of Sheltered Sages. So if this is your first time watching, we are two formerly sheltered homeschoolers.
Yep.
And we just kind of read through the chaos of the internet.
That's exactly true.
Some of the exciting things. Sometimes we have themes, sometimes we don't.
Yep.
This episode, we definitely do have a theme, though.
We do have a theme for this episode. What's the theme for this episode?
It's on parents.
Ooh.
Yes. So, to all the love to my parents, I'm going to do my best to not entirely throw you under the bus this episode. But it might happen a little bit. Just a little bit.
I mean, when we were talking about this idea to begin with, I was like, how much can I say about them? My parents are wonderful people. Like,
Same.
absolutely fantastic parents. I could not have asked for any better parents because they are wonderful.
Yes.
That said, there are always things like that parents do that sometimes you're like,
Yeah, or there's some, like, not mine and not yours from what I've heard, but there are some parents that should not be parents.
Yeah.
Hot take from Mr. Andrew. Sorry, I deal with kids all day, and it's Mr. Andrew. I refuse to go by my last name because it is a weird name to say, and they would just make fun of me for it. Regardless, but yeah, there are some parents who, and especially as someone who works with kids on the daily basis, there are some parents who I interact with, and I'm just like, maybe, just maybe, you would have been better without kids. And maybe your kids would have been better without you. Maybe.
I mean, parenting is a difficult thing to begin with.
Yes.
It's like, well, people think that oftentimes you go into the parenting sphere with a whole bunch of information on what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it and all these things like that. You kind of realize everyone's just kind of figuring it out as they go along.
Yeah.
Whether you're parents of homeschoolers or parents of people in public school or parents of people who are not going to school at all. Like,
yeah, that's illegal, but that's a whole other side story.
You're figuring it out along with everybody else. No one really knows what they're doing, but some people do it better than others. Yeah, I'll say that.
Yeah, and so as formerly sheltered homeschool students, we spent a lot of time with our parents.
Absolutely.
Yes. So my mom was our primary teacher, which I think we talked about, which is the same for you, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So my dad was very much like working the full-time job and kind of was there at nights and would be there over the weekends, but my mom was teacher, dad was principal.
That's how it works.
That was how it worked in our family dynamic. Obviously shifted as we got older and things like that, but that's kind of how it started for us.
Dad was also PE teacher, which was really fun, knowing that it's this full-grown man who's able to run faster and do a lot of things. It's training these small children as they try to follow and do whatever he's doing. It was a fun time.
That's good.
I did enjoy it.
That's good. See, I'm just trying to convince my dad to get back into Taekwondo with me.
Ooh.
This is your official call out, Dad. You have heard it. It's on the internet now.
Join us.
Because I will never get my wife in there.
Yes. Before we get into these stories, though, I want to let everyone know that we usually read stories from a certain subreddit, which is Am I the A-hole? But we don't like saying A-hole here. We like saying Picklefoot instead, just because it's a more family-friendly version of that word, and also it's a really good homeschool insult.
I love it. It's so much fun. Every time I get to say it. I even say it now. I've started using it outside of like the podcast because it's just fun. And now I get people looking at me like, what? And then I'm like, oh, you want to know where it comes from? You'll have to listen to my podcast. And then I plug the podcast.
Yeah.
Because that's how you do it. Advertisement. Just kidding. I'm
Marketing.
not good at advertising. Marketing. Clicks.
Masterclass. You want to know how to make a podcast? Just pop off. This is how.
This is how we know whatever watches us again. But anyways.
But now that we've done that, I think it's time for the episode to start officially.
Yes, we're officially going to start now. All right. So first story I have for you today.
Yep.
Am I the picklefoot for asking my mother to leave because she won't stop wasting my food?
Maybe. I was waiting for it to say, won't stop wasting my time. I was like, yeah, you're the picklefoot.
A little bit, yeah.
But go ahead. Let's get some more context.
Well, my baby sister just had a baby, and our mom came to help. My sister and her husband live in a tiny apartment with no room for my mom. I agreed to let her stay with me since I live only 8 blocks away. It's walkable. My plan was to Uber her over in the morning and pick her up after work. I only eat 1 meal a day during the week, supper. I have coffee for breakfast and some fruit for lunch. On Saturday, I treat myself to a good breakfast, and Sundays, I take the women I'm dating for brunch. My mother decided that this was unacceptable. She got up early and went through my fridge and freezer to make me breakfast. I told her that I appreciate it, but I do not usually eat breakfast. She said that was stupid. I very clearly communicated to her that she was welcome to eat anything in my home, but please not make me breakfast as it was a waste. She made breakfast the following day. I walked out without eating it. I figured worst case scenario, I could eat it for supper. She threw it out since I didn't eat it. I told her once more, please do not waste my food. She made breakfast for me the next day. Okay. I asked her if she was developing dementia. That was a low blow. She is wasting my food for no good reason. I'm not poor or anything, but wasting food is a pet peeve of mine. She said I was being ungrateful for her help, and she was doing it to be nice since I was letting her stay with me. I explained to her again that I did not need, want, require, or desire breakfast during the week. She said she understood. She made me breakfast the next day. I had had enough. I took her luggage with me when I dropped her off at my sister's home. I told my doorman that my guest was no longer welcome. I got so many messages from her and my sister all day long. Even my dad called me to ask me to change my mind. I said no. He had to drive up and rent an Airbnb close to my sister because my mom was too scared to stay by herself. He's retired, so he didn't miss work or anything. My sister came over alone to talk to me. She said I was being a complete butthead and that I could afford the food my mom was wasting. I said I could, but I didn't want to. She literally used up 2 months' worth of my food. She made up huge breakfasts that I didn't even eat. I kept all my bacon in individual servings. She thought out 3 for breakfast every day, 1 for her and 2 for me, and I ate 0. My father has asked me to let her back in. I said I would, under the condition that she understands that my food is completely off limits to her. She can pay for her own food. I said I would make room in the fridge and freezer for her. She said I was being ridiculous and petty. So my dad is staying neutral, but my mom and sister think I'm a butthead. My girlfriend thinks the whole thing is hilarious and refuses to get involved. So, is he the picklefoot?
It's complicated.
Yep.
It's always complicated, or it's often complicated in these kinds of situations. First question for me, how old is he?
He did not give an age, but I'm guessing at the very least mid-20s to early 30s is what I would guesstimate, just because of the way that he's writing and he seems really established in his life.
Yeah, so it seems like he's a little bit more, like you said, established in his life, and his mom is over here doing something. So once you move out of your parents' house, like once you're in your parents' house, it's like I kind of said in a previous episode, it's their rules, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, even if you have things in that house, which sometimes I don't fully agree with, is going to be their stuff. From the home that I grew up in, it kind of came across that the food in the house is my parents' food. They bought it, so whatever happens to it, they can cook it, they can throw it away, they can do whatever they want with it. And it was kind of established in that way because it is their house, it is their food, it is their money, you respect it. Moving from that place to another place, his own place, and his mom is coming into this place and using this food without really asking him, and even after he has requested her to stop using this food in this certain way, which seems like she's trying to do it for a nice reason, but we'll get to that. She continues to kind of disregard his wants and wishes to just do it. And so then it's a fun little situation. Parents sometimes, my parents are excluded from this wonderful fact, but parents sometimes have the difficulty of not recognizing that shift from this person is in your domain of respect and where they need to do exactly what you say and you get to do whatever you want with them, really, to when you move out and you don't really have that anymore. I think that's a big complication in really any family situation, especially when you've lived with them for a long time. As a homeschooler, like we said, our parents are with us constantly. Like that's kind of the whole idea of it. My mom was with us. So I'd give a little more leniency to, let's say mom wants to make breakfast. For myself, I do need to eat more. So like if mom wants to make me breakfast, I'm okay with that. That said, if you have a really big thing with your food and you don't want it to be used like that, you want to keep up with it.
Well, and some people even do like intermittent fasting, right?
Yeah.
So some people, and it sounds like for him, he has his coffee in the morning. He has fruit for lunch. So he's not starving himself to dinner. He has a little bit of a fruit snack for lunch. And then he eats supper. So he probably eats a decent meal at supper time.
Yeah.
So there's no guarantee that it's like a nutritional thing at this point in time either.
So but it's also mom saying, no, you're going to eat the way that I want you to eat, and you're just going to have to respect that. So with all that said, I will not say he is a big picklefoot for being upset with mom, especially if he has the money to pay for it and mom is doing it. For one, I feel like mom is being the biggest picklefoot for not listening to him and doing it regardless. There's other ways you can do it. Like if he doesn't want a full breakfast, right? But you still feel like you would like him to eat, ask him what he does for breakfast. Maybe make his coffee in the morning
for him. That'd be
because
great.
That's what he does. You might feel that it's not very smart. Like she said in the story, she felt it was stupid, which a very mom thing to say, actually. Like, I don't agree with you.
It's like, well, you're stupid.
Yeah.
But okay.
But like, yeah, you can make him coffee instead. It's also respecting that boundary. It's hard for parents often to shift from that. This is my son, and I basically am in charge of him, and I can tell him what to do. And if I feel it's not smart, I can kind of push him to do something different, to going, my son has his own apartment. He is allowed to eat what he wants or not eat what he wants. And I have to listen because I'm in his space now instead of him being in my space.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be something that we see a big theme of. And you see this theme a lot, whether you are reading through, Am I the Picklefoot? Or if you're reading relationship advice or you're just reading a lot of other stories, a lot of times you'll see these stories about parents that haven't moved on from that caretaker role into the mentorship/friendship role.
Yeah.
And so and the way that I have always seen it, and I think is the best way that I feel in terms of how parenting should handle it, is this idea of when we are young, we need that parental role. We need that role, the person that's going to tell us right from wrong, that's going to help train us, that's going to help teach us the things that we need to learn, right?
Yeah.
But as we get older, even as we start entering our late teen years, that dynamic needs to start shifting away from the you will do what I say because I'm your parent kind of role into the well, you are almost an adult now. So we need to start learning how to make choices for ourselves and what best choices are, and then allowing us to make those mistakes and deal with the consequences of those actions. So I think that's and I'll even speak from my experience. I think that's for my parents. It wasn't until I moved out that we fully were able to get to that realization of I am no longer a child living in your home that has to do what you say. I am a adult who is learning and needs to be able to make my own choices and things like that. Yes, I still need to respect my parents. I still need to show that to them, as long as that that respect is mutual and we're trying to make sure that we continue to grow as people. But that being said, the relationship should no longer be you will do what I say because I'm your parent, and it should pivot into hey, you're an adult now and I want to continue this relationship with you. So what what do we need to do to move forward? And it seems like she is stuck in the I am your mother and you'll do what I say role.
Yep.
Instead of the this is my adult son. I think it's son. I might be wrong.
A son? No.
Oh, they actually didn't give their gender.
Oh, adult child.
Yes, their adult child. I shouldn't assume.
Yeah.
Their adult child who is making decisions for themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where I get upset about this, is he made a very clear boundary. And this is the hard part. And I see a lot of times with like stories with parents where it's like boundaries are being set. And I think it's always weird when someone is like, oh, well, this is a boundary I'm setting and you shouldn't cross this boundary. Like, it's weird because like when you put it in that language, it can be very easy to get like confrontational of like, oh my goodness, this is like a big conflict thing.
Yeah.
He didn't handle it. They didn't handle it that way.
No.
They were like, hey, this makes me uncomfortable. I will not be eating breakfast. Please do not make me breakfast anymore. It will go to waste because you're throwing it away.
Yeah.
And so this mother said, I know better than you. Well, by her actions, she said, I know better than you. And continued to make him breakfast 4 days in a row. 4 separate breakfasts. One time I would understand. A second time I might be able to get behind, but the third and fourth time,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because then it's becoming a battle of wills almost, of where it's like he's like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Say whatever you want to me about not making breakfast. I'm still going to make it regardless of whether you eat it or not. I don't even care if you eat it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to keep making it.
Yeah. And so that's where I think the problem really comes down. How he handled it, I think you kind of raised this on the head. I think there's a slight picklefoot because of the way he handled it. Just because someone is being a picklefoot does not mean that you should automatically react in kind. And that's where it comes down to like, this is more of my own beliefs on things like that. And I am a big person that does believe that we should always try and be respectful to our parents, even if we don't always feel that they deserve that. Just because I do think that is just a great way to handle it. But that doesn't mean that we should let parents walk all over us either.
No.
And so I would have handled that a little bit differently myself had I been in that scenario. I would have definitely done like a cost analysis of like, how much is this food going to cost me? How long is she planning on staying? And then been like, okay, sat her down and be like, hey, so I made this very clear I was uncomfortable with this, which it sounded like he did kind of have that conversation of like, you need to stop this, though he did ask if she was going through dementia, which I think is a little kind of rude. That's a low blow. Don't do that.
Picklefoot.
That's
behavior.
a picklefoot. Like, that was the part where I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
But that being said, it's like, okay, but also you kind of just grabbed her stuff and dropped her off at her mom and told your doorman not to let her in.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it's a very not appropriate way to handle that either.
No.
So that's where I'm like, I'm kind of with you, where I'm like minor picklefoot.
Yeah.
Because she was definitely being a picklefoot, but the way you responded to it was not in a way that doesn't eliminate you from being a picklefoot as well.
That's fair. Do we have comments, though?
Yes, we do have comments.
Yeah. What are those comments?
So I will say that the general post did label him not the picklefoot, which there isn't a slightly the picklefoot rating. There's just, you are a picklefoot or you're not a picklefoot, or everyone's a picklefoot here.
Yeah.
So
sometimes they say soft picklefoot.
Some people say that, but like the official rating doesn't say soft picklefoot.
That's fair.
So regardless, these people say, not the picklefoot. Sounds much more like your mother was initiating a power play and that she would have continued wasting your food, which she knew bothered you, but that was the point, until you capitulated. That was when she would have won, quote unquote. You throwing her out was inconvenient, so of course you had to be the bad guy, but that shouldn't have been necessary if your mother had been the least bit reasonable. People tend to take the easier route, and asking a reasonable person to capitulate is much easier than asking an unreasonable person to be reasonable. Yep. And that's why I think the mom and the sister were probably both like, hey, just take her back. Probably because the mom was complaining and they didn't want to stand up to her and be like, well, actually, he told you no. Yeah. You probably should have done the right thing. Yeah. They were just like, hey, she's being like really ornery. Why don't you take her back in?
It's complicated too, because some of those relationships have happened over time. It's not like this is the first time you're recognizing that mom is like that. And I've even seen in different family situations where they're like, oh yeah, my sister's kind of like this, or my brother, he's kind of just that kind of person. Dad, he's just an interesting individual, regardless of what they're doing, regardless of how they're behaving. You kind of just let it go because this is how they are.
That's just who they are. Yeah.
And I feel like you're saying too, those boundaries need to be respected regardless of who it is, regardless of how long this has been happening. Because sometimes it's like maybe they did let mom walk all over them when they were younger. That's a different situation. They are now older. They have their own place. They are asking for something, and that should be respected. Yeah. I will say for my family, my parents always said that they were raising us not to become older versions of their kids. but they were raising us to become future adults. They didn't want us to depend on them for everything, but it's like, we're going to give you these challenges, or we're going to give you this information, not so that we can constantly be in charge of you, but so that you can be on your own, because eventually we're not going to be completely, we won't have them to just go over and say, hey, am I supposed to be doing this? Is something else going to happen, or something like that? So having that kind of separation where it's like, you are going to be adults someday, but right now you're not, but I'm going to prepare for that. And when it happens, that switch can happen a lot easier.
Yeah. And I think, so like, for me, it was a little bit different because growing up, as I've talked about in previous episodes, my older and younger brother both had Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So my parents had to take on more of a caretaker role, which naturally kind of pivoted to me also having to kind of be in a caretaker role with my older brother. There's a lot of things. He was pretty much in a wheelchair full time since he was 13. And so in that aspect, there were moments where it's like sometimes the like parental side of things could fall by the wayside, understandably, because when you're in that caretaker role, it sometimes takes your entire energy.
Yep.
And so there were times where it's like I recognize, and this is something that like I've come to terms with, this like you'll hear people talking about like their inner child being neglected. So this idea of like I had to grow up a lot sooner than a lot of kids my age, and that wasn't a like fault of my parents, because I just was in a situation where I had to understandably be helpful to try and help my older brother and try and help out around the house with chores and things like that, because that was an extra burden that we had as a family. Yeah. And that was just one of those things we had to deal with. But it's one of those
burden
things
that you wanted as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like I cared about him, and I absolutely wanted to be the one to help him and like help alleviate my parents. So all that being said, it is one of those things where it's like, you have to recognize when and where you're going to set up those things, and recognize that like sometimes it's like, looking back at it, sometimes the way my parents treated me, considering how mature I was at the time, was a little frustrating, because it's like, you already trust me to make all of these mature decisions, but then you won't trust me when I'm 16 years old to like stay up at an appropriate hour playing video games and ground me for 2 weeks. So it's just like, you know, it's like there's a little bit of I'm confused about what my expectations are here.
Yeah, but it can get weird. Yeah. But you know,
there's a few other things, basically kind of repeating what we said, though. Kind of like there needs to be healthy boundary setting. You did that. You kind of handled it a little aggressively, but you have every right to do that if your mom's not listening.
That's fair. So I like it. Yeah, I'd say it's still soft. You're the picklefoot.
Yeah.
But also, mom is the picklefoot.
Mom is definitely the picklefoot in this scenario.
They're the picklefoot.
All right. You got a story for me?
I do have a story for you. And before we continue on, if you do hear little bells in the background, it's a happy little cat.
This is a happy little
playing
cat
around.
I don't know why he's in his cat tree. I don't know why he's making so much noise.
You know, sometimes I just like to be what they are.
He knows I'm recording. He's like, I'm gonna be a nuisance.
But I do have a story for you.
Awesome.
It's a shorter story. So
okay, let's do it.
Am I the picklefoot for not waiting for mom to show some home videos?
I'm gonna need context.
Yeah,
definitely.
some of the story titles don't actually give the story properly.
I mean, like, what kind of family home videos?
Yeah.
Are we showing, like, you know, birthing videos? Because, like, absolutely not.
No, thank you. So this happened about an hour ago. So it's fresh.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Not in the actual story.
When they posted it.
When they posted it.
Okay, yeah.
My brother, 16, and I, 19, female, took our dog for a walk today to the park. Since there was no one at the park, we decided to have some fun while there. I took some videos at the park, mostly of my dog chasing the zip line while my brother was on it. Very cute.
Very cute.
And of him hitting the icicles off the edge of the play equipment. Nothing fancy. I also took a video in front of our house before we left of my dog jumping to get said icicles, which my mom watched from the window. Fast forward to tonight, we were watching I Love Lucy. Both my parents fell asleep during the episode and woke up right at the end. My mom immediately got up to go brush her teeth and go to bed. It is important to note that she has been going to bed early recently. I remember that I hadn't seen the videos yet and decided to airplay them to the TV. There weren't that many, and like I said, they were nothing revolutionary. There was probably about 5 minutes total of video. Anyways, I finished showing all the video just as my mom came back into the room. She was really upset at me for not waiting until she was done brushing her teeth to show the videos because she didn't feel included. This is obviously understandable, so I told her I could show them again, and the only reason I didn't wait was because I thought she was going to bed. She didn't say anything and just walked upstairs. I thought it was over, but maybe 2 minutes later, she came back downstairs extremely upset. My dad told her she was being over dramatic, to which she said she had a right to be upset. Before going back upstairs, she said, "You guys don't need me anyways." I obviously felt really bad because I probably should have waited and I didn't realize it mattered so much to her. I also didn't really say anything or directly apologize when she came back down. So yeah, I just wanted an objective opinion. Am I the picklefoot for not waiting to show the videos, or even for not properly apologizing?
Sorry for the loud ASMR breathing, but I have so many feelings about this.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there,
so
right?
much. And it's such a small thing, but it speaks volumes about the mother's opinion about like that.
I will say, before you get into it,
yes,
probably everyone has a situation like this, right?
Yes, we've all been.
Where a parent, one parent or the other parent or anything like that has had a reaction that you feel is way weird and strange and very. So that's why when I read this, I was like, this is quite interesting. This is a very specific one that I want to bring up. So
I like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Let me ask a question and see if maybe you have that context.
Yeah.
Did they answer in the comments if anyone asked the question of whether or not this is something she's done before or does constantly, or is this the first time she's ever done this?
As far as I can tell, this is at least one of the first times she's ever done this.
Okay. So then what I will say, if there are two separate opinions that I have, and unfortunately that we only have this one context to go off of. Yep. But if it's a situation where this is the first time they've ever done this, and it's like huge.
Yeah.
It is certainly possible that this is just the explosion after a buildup of multiple things that the mom has kept to herself and has refused to talk about.
Yeah.
This could very well be the mom who has made sure that everyone else's stockings were stuffed on Christmas and didn't have anything in her stocking, or the one who does slave away to do all these things quietly without that recognition and does and it's gotten to this level where she doesn't feel included. Yeah. So if that is the situation, I will say I don't think they are the picklefoot for this situation, but I do think it needs to be a situation where they sit down and they're like, "Mom, what's the bigger issue?
Yeah.
What's happening here?" And so that's where I'll say if that is the first scenario.
Yeah.
Second scenario is that this is one of those mothers who is a woe is me, my children hate me, I don't even know why you want me around if you're just gonna not care about me. I want to add a Southern Belle complex to this voice because it feels very Southern mom, I have slaved away over these children all my life and none of them care about me. But if that is the kind of parent that this is, and it's you just don't need me. I see how it is. You don't need me around. You don't want me to be here for these videos. And if this is constant behavior, you need to work on establishing incredibly strict boundaries and not allowing yourself to be emotionally baited by that, because that's what it is. It's emotional baiting for you to completely stop talking about whatever it is and just pay attention to that parent. Yep. And I have met parents who are like that. I have met people who are like that. And those kind of people are the kind of people that have kids to make themselves feel good.
Yeah.
And so it's all about them. And it kind of leans more towards the narcissism side. Obviously, I'm not going to make any diagnoses. I have no professional training in that. Yeah. But it does kind of lean towards that. It's all about me. And it's all about making myself look good. And it's all about what I can get from my children. Yeah. And so if that is who this mother is, I'm so sorry for the OP, because you have a rough rest of your childhood.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's the ages as well, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. What were the ages again? I missed those.
Her little brother is 16, and she is 19.
She's nice. So she's an adult.
She's, an adult.
Okay.
Still young adult.
I was thinking
but
almost like 15 and like 12 for the story.
That's why I thought it was interesting as well. There is this, not my parents, obviously not your parents as well, but there are parents that I have heard of before which have this kind of passive aggressive type stance towards their kid.
So passive aggressive.
Like instead of, some parents, their reprimandation happens with, I will take away your stuff. Kind of like one of the stories we talked about before, where it's like, I'll take away your Switch so you can't play video games because you did something wrong. Some use physical reprimandation, which my parents did as well.
Yep, same.
We can have a whole other topic about that. But I think one of the most toxic ways of reprimandation of children is using passive-aggressive stances and kind of like making yourself a victim in it.
Absolutely.
It's the whole idea of, you did something wrong and that hurt me. And I don't want you to hurt me, because if you hurt me and you're okay hurting me, you're the bad person. And that puts a complex in that child's mind where it's like, it's not necessarily about me, it's about my parent. If I'm hurting my parent, if I'm doing something towards them, which makes them afraid of that, but also it's like, now they feel responsible for their parents' physical well-being and mental well-being. It's like, oh, I didn't go to sleep on time. That's going to hurt my mom's feelings, and I can't hurt my mom's feelings. I'm responsible for my mom's feelings. Your children are not responsible for your feelings.
Amen.
As a child, you are not responsible, directly at least, for your parents' feelings. Yeah. It should be a distinction, but I feel like that should be brought out. That's not a good situation. If you're in that situation, like you were saying, it can be really complicated to extract yourself from that, because it can be built up over a very long amount of time.
It's a learned behavior pattern at that point in time. I think one of the things that can be very difficult, and this is one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate for therapy, because sometimes it's when you're a child and you're growing up in this environment, that is what you know. Yeah. You know this A, B, C, and D. And you assume that is how it is for the rest of the world. It's not until you get out into the world and start meeting other people, they're like, oh, A, B, C, and D that's not normal. Nope. And so it's one of those things where it's like, if this situation, OP, if you're listening to this, or I'm sure the comments have said some similar things, but like, OP needs to recognize that is not okay behavior. They are not responsible, as you said, for how mom is feeling, especially in the sense of, they tried to very quickly be like, oh yeah, let me replay it. Like, I thought you were going to bed. Yeah, absolutely. That is how that conversation should have done. She'd be like, okay, sat on the couch, watched the video again, then chuckled about it, and then gone to bed. But no, she made it into this big thing. And if it is from this perspective of, woe is me, no one cares about me, I want you to think about my feelings and how you can't, do it, then that's where it becomes an issue. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to give like the second thing, the advocate for the other side. All right. Let's say mom isn't trying to be bad. This isn't like a behavior that's happened before. What I found really interesting, the ages are important. She's 19. Like you said, she's a new adult in very many ways. The younger brother is 16. Mom potentially has gone from the person that's super, super important in both these kids' lives to be becoming a little bit less. Yeah. They don't need mom to go to the park. They don't need mom to do as much. And so in that way, mom still wants to be included. What I thought was really interesting about the story as well is it reminded me of something I learned when I moved out. Well, yeah, I guess it was when I moved out. Parents are people too. Yes. Parents have feelings. Parents can feel sad. Parents can feel lonely. Parents can feel angry. Sometimes parents are wrong. I know it's difficult. I know for a lot of, if you're young right now and you're like looking at your parents, they're never wrong. Sometimes they are wrong. They probably won't tell you, but they are wrong sometimes.
Philip's parents were perfect.
My parents were absolutely perfect. Well, they'll even tell you. Sometimes they did stuff. They're like, probably shouldn't have been. Very rare. Very, very, very rare.
But just trying to save your bacon. I can't drill you out of that one.
Thank you. But like, parents are people too. And so realizing that sometimes they're going through something. It could be potentially like, you know, like you said, it could be the holidays where she's feeling a lot of pressure to just be the person who takes care of this family. And she's grappling with how it's changing over time. And so it does seem like there's something else that's happening here that we're not really talking about. I don't think the original poster is the Picklefoot, like obviously.
No, absolutely not.
But I'm not going to jump to say that
the
mom in this situation is the full Picklefoot.
Yeah.
And her reaction's not good, but you know.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too, like, honestly, one of the best things that you can do for your parents, and in my opinion, I'm not a parent yet, but I can only speak from what I have seen of the kids that I've worked with and the things like that, is when the parents explain and help their children understand that they are people too.
Yeah.
And not like in a, like, you know, it's if your child only sees you as someone that they have to constantly obey 24/7, they cannot disappoint in any way, and they cannot make mistakes in front of, you do not have a child. You have a servant who you're trying to train up to be the perfect doormat, because they are going to grow up and become an adult who does not stand up for themselves and does not know how to set healthy boundaries. You have to allow your children to be able to recognize that you are a person. You're going to make mistakes. And I'm a big advocate, and I've seen this too, and even with my own kids that I work with at the school, that like you have to be willing to be vulnerable with your children.
Yeah.
I think, and
it's super scary.
Yes, making sure that they know that like you're not responsible for their emotions. But there have been days when I've walked in and like they have been nonstop difficult when I've been picking them up from the school, like constantly screaming and shouting in the back of the car, no matter how many times I asked. And like there have been times where I've had to like sit them down and I'm like, let me be very clear. Right now I'm upset, and you're not responsible for how I feel. But that being said, I have asked you guys multiple times to do these things. These things have not been done, so this is how I'm feeling right now, and I'm feeling hurt. So what we're going to do moving forward, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to breathe and compose myself. Please think about the rules that we have in place and the systems that we have in place and how you would like to be in that scenario. And moving forward, let's try and do better. Understood? And basically, like, I'll just have that conversation with them.
Yeah.
Instead of me sitting in the back just slamming on the brakes and turning around and screaming, "Shut up, everyone. I'm the driver. I'm the adult here. You will listen to what I say, or I will make you do push-ups when we get back to the school."
Yep.
Because that is a way I could handle it. But I feel like it's more important to build a relationship with these kids and recognize that it's about making them aware that I'm a person and that I have feelings, and trying to help them connect with like, oh, I feel upset when people don't listen to me. Maybe I should listen to Mr. Andrew a little bit more often too.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's just how I feel about that. But a little tangential, but at the same time, I think we've kind of hit the point on the head. Definitely not the
Do you want those comments?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the top comments that is here, they say, "Not the Picklefoot. Sounds like there's something else your mom is upset about."
Yeah.
This was just what she reacted to, and that's not cool. Maybe tomorrow ask her if she was really upset about the videos or if there's something else bothering her. If she doubles down, though, good luck. But not the Picklefoot.
Yeah.
So same thing that we're talking about before. Things happen. Parents are people. Sometimes they say things that they probably shouldn't say, but, you know, respecting them as much as you can, as long as it's not something absolutely terrible that they have done. Yeah. And then working through it. Sometimes you might just need to give mom a hug. Be like, "Hey, I love you. I do need you. I care about you. Let's talk through this, and let's not have that next time." Yeah.
Well, and that would be my encouragement to parents too, is it's like, if you allow your children to realize that you are a person who makes mistakes, then they will go to that as a possibility when something like this happens. Like, maybe something's going on. Maybe like, I know my mom can, you know, hold things in and get upset sometimes, and it blows into a bigger picture. And like, maybe we need to sit down and have a talk and figure out what that is. Instead of being like, "I've made all the mistakes. I messed up. What did I do wrong? How do I fix this?" It's like, no, people can have outbursts. People can make mistakes, and we have to be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Now, what we do during those times and how we hurt people.
Very important.
Very important. Don't hurt people when you're angry.
Nope.
You're allowed to be angry. Do not hurt people when you're angry.
Yes.
I've had this conversation with some very young children who like to throw things. You don't get to hurt people when you're angry.
That's good.
You have to you can let the anger out in constructive ways, but we don't hurt people either with our physical hands or with our words.
Absolutely.
If you're being vulnerable with your children and allowing them to get an insight into who you are and how you work as a person, they will then recognize that there might be something more going on.
Yeah.
So that's my thoughts on that.
I like that. Yeah. Well, I'd still say not the pickle
Not
foot.
the pickle foot. And I hope it is just a situation where like mom's stressed out and things are going on. So just talk to her. Maybe that's what the answer is.
Good idea.
So
yeah. I think we have time for one more story.
just one more?
Yeah.
All right. Am I the pickle foot for telling my bio father that he doesn't deserve to be called dad? I recently talked to my biological father for the first time in over 10 years. The last time I saw him, it was my 7th birthday party, and the entire time he complained to my mother that I wasn't calling him dad. She went off on him, saying that he isn't, so no, I don't have to call him that. For clarification, when I was about a year old, he stole my mother's money. She was the only one who worked while also being 19, right before he was supposed to fly out to move in with us. She canceled his plane ticket, and after that, it was inconsistent when I would get to visit him. Whenever he would call to talk to me, it always ended with him talking to my mother and trying to get back together with her. I realized rather early on that he didn't give one crap about me. So, back to the present. I decided to try talking to him, and he started getting mad that I called him by his first name. Everyone calls him by his middle name, even my mother. I did it to annoy him purposefully because I'm spiteful. So, don't love that. So I, quote unquote, calmly explained to him that he cannot just not exist in my life and then expect me to cater to his every childish whims, and that he needs to grow up. My mother laughed when I told her what I said, but I feel guilty after the fact. Am I the picklefoot? There is an edit, which I think I'll read before, because there's also an update afterwards. But I'll read the edit first. He reached out to meet up, and I agreed because I guess I'm still naive. Also, I have absolutely no respect for that man. So that is where that is.
So we wish that life and parents and everything would be wonderful and perfect, as my parents are so wonderful and so fantastic. But sometimes...
Notice he didn't say perfect.
I mean, it's fair. Sometimes things do not happen in that way. And my heart goes out to people who have that kind of different family structure. Yeah. Because like you hope that, two people would come together, they would have a child, or they would get a child in very different ways, and that would just be their family structure. Yeah. For a lot of families, it doesn't happen in that way, either through divorce or other complications. Like you have parents in different places, parents that are not consistently with you.
Or children of like one night stands, things like that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't always happen in that way. Sometimes it's not anyone's fault. It's just, it happened. I'd say it's even worse for kids who are looking to have a relationship with that parent that's not always present. Mm-hmm. But that parent, like you were kind of saying in the beginning of the episode, doesn't really or isn't really ready to be a parent. Mm. It seems like this dad is struggling with what it means to be a part of this kid's life. And it kind of has become so clear that this kid has realized that. And it's like, if you're not going to really respect your part in my life, I'm not necessarily going to respect you as a person. Yeah. I'm going to call you by whatever name I want you to, and I'm even going to say some kind of hurtful things towards you because you haven't really been respectful in that way. So in this situation, I'd say the things that this person said, sure, you could say it's a kind of picklefoot thing to say. As like a kind-hearted, loving individual, you wouldn't say those kinds of things to anyone.
Yeah, but...
That said... Now, I did not have that situation. My dad was always in the picture, and I appreciate him immensely for that. And I love him even more for all the things that he has done, knowing how complicated it is in those situations. So thank you, Dad, for everything you've done. For those fathers who haven't been there and those kids have to grapple with what that means in
Or
their
mothers,
life.
too.
Or mothers, yeah.
Yeah.
It can get complicated. And it's like a lot of times it comes down to how the child in that situation feels about their dad and less about how the dad actually is behaving.
Yeah. Well, and I think it comes down to with the fact that there are certain efforts that someone can make to be part of your life. If this father cared, there's more efforts that he would make to be in that kid's life. I really do feel for OP. So again, clarification, we are both children of a nuclear family in the sense of not nuclear explosion, but like traditional nuclear family.
Yeah.
And so like we can't fully speak to this feeling of like not having, but I do have friends that are not in that traditional environment, or friends that are of like remarried or of adoption or things like that. And there's a lot of different situations, but I think it really does come down to the fact of what does it mean to be a parent?
Yep.
Just because you had a baby doesn't mean you're going to be a good father.
That's true.
It's kind of like you were saying, people don't know what they're getting into when they first start having kids. And it's all about learning and growing and things like that. But it's also about developing a relationship with that child.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very fair, especially that like this guy's like, I don't like that he doesn't call me dad. Well, dad is an honorific title.
Yeah.
Respectfully.
Yeah.
Like a dad is someone who is there and is actively doing what they can to try and be a part in their life.
Yeah.
Like there are people who have the quote unquote traditional family that don't have a good relationship with their dad, even though their dad was technically there for everything. You can be an absent parent and still be at home every night and still not be cheating. And so you can be a bad mother, a bad father, even if you're there physically all the time, just because you're neglecting, because you're abusing, because you're doing all these things. So you don't have the right to be called dad just because you are a person who gave birth to this child or was involved in this child being created.
Yeah.
So all that to be said, I think it's very fair for the son. I think it's even honorable that the son wanted to reach out.
Yeah.
But it is his choice at the end of the day whether or not he calls this person who wasn't in his life dad.
That's true. I did have, I think, multiple friends, actually, who their biological father kind of left the picture, and they had a stepfather step in. But for, I think it's specifically what I'm thinking of, is two people that I know, that stepfather stepped in and really made a difference in their life, really stepped up and became the father that they might have wanted in that other individual, while the other individual never really showed up ever again. Yeah. And for both of those situations, they really said, this is my dad. That other person, whoever they are, whatever reasons that they decided that they didn't really want to have this part in my life, that's for them. But I'm not going to let them deciding to leave ruin the rest of my life when there's another person who made the conscious decision to stay in my life, to support me, to love me as a father should. I'm going to call them dad instead. Yeah. And I really, really do respect that, because while it is kind of like you're saying, it's an honorific, while it is still just a word, right? It's something that you use to tell someone else what their relationship is to you. Yeah. But that relationship is really important. Parents are important, regardless of whether they were good or bad or just okay. Everyone has parents in one way or another, or had parents in one way or another. And the way that they treat you and the way that they kind of raised you is going to affect the rest of your life. And so it's important to really think about, if you are a parent, how you're treating your kid, like really paying attention to that. I'd say if you are able to be a part of that kid's life and to step up and be there, it's super important. Yeah. It's like, forget everything else, be a part, be there. If the kid doesn't want you there, that's for them, and you should respect their wishes, but like also try to step up. For this poster who's talking about this, I'm sorry. It's not great. I respect them for wanting to have that relationship, for trying. I even respect them for what they said. Again, a little bit of a pickle foot on what they said, but in the context of what's going on, I kind of say it's par for the course.
Well, there is an update, so I can give a little bit more context.
Let's do it.
So, he replies later, update, I have cut all contact with him. Apparently, he has threatened to throw my mother off a balcony while she was pregnant with me. She also told me that he had stolen all of her money except for 90 cents, and that she was the only one with a job at 18. Thanks for your guys' words, and I have decided that I don't need to have him in my life.
It's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people would hear this story and go, wow, how horrible of a person is this guy? Like, that's terrible. That's absolutely bad. Which I respect that. If the original poster wants to have that reaction, that's great. But from the people I know who's been through similar situations, it's not generally the reaction they have. It's more of a sad reaction. When this person was born, they didn't know who this person, their father was. So growing up and having to realize later that this guy is kind of a picklefoot or a full-on
not even
picklefoot.
kind of. Honestly, I feel like we can kind of slide this dad into the deviled egg territory.
Yes.
Yeah.
This guy is a deviled egg.
This guy's a deviled egg.
You realize that your biological dad
The
is
dad
a
is the
deviled
deviled egg. Yes, very important. Not the child.
No, not the child. It's a hard thing to understand, and I guess what we're saying before, therapy is great.
Yeah,
if
go to therapy.
Original Poster is not going through therapy, I recommend it. I mean, hopefully you're already going through therapy, just because it seems like there's a lot going on here that you probably want to talk through, but go to therapy, work through this, but we support you. If you don't want to talk to them anymore, absolutely, you're not the picklefoot.
The comments are really aggressive, but basically all just kind of in agreement with what we said, except more along the lines of him not even being like in any way, shape, or form a father, which I don't disagree with. I think that's an absolutely fair statement. Just kind of dragging him through the mud and kind of a negativity that I don't really want our podcast to be fully known for.
That's fair.
But basically, Opie is very involved in the comments, though.
Yeah.
Basically, just like all of these. Well, no, actually, let me read this one just because this person shares their own experience.
Yeah.
Not the picklefoot. I also have a toxic child provider. There we go. That's a great way to say that word.
Yeah.
We talked about that before, because we weren't sure how I wanted to say it. Child provider who left my mom while I was being born.
Yes.
I met him as a teenager a few times and have had sporadic contact as an adult. Most recently, he lost his crap at me because I wouldn't let him see his grandchildren, even though he hadn't seen me in 12 years, and we had only been talking again for 2 weeks. I explained that he doesn't get to waltz in and be the grandparent of the year, and that I wasn't prepared to give him the opportunity to let my kids down like he had let me down. People like this are just toxic and don't deserve to be a part of your life. Like that. And then OP replied, geez, not many Father of the Year awards lately. I really hope that you've healed. I have no doubt that you're a great parent to your children. So
that's really sweet.
I think OP has a really good head on their shoulders.
Yeah.
I think OP is going to be great. I think OP sees what it means to be a bad parent, and hopefully they will be a better parent to their own children.
Break the cycle.
Yeah, break the cycle.
Absolutely.
So, do we want to end on a wholesome note? It might stretch out the little.
On a wholesome note.
Okay,
Yeah.
I love this story, and I wanted to share this in our first Geek Dive episode. We just ran out of time, so I've been saving it for a time when we can do a fun, wholesome parent thing.
That's fair.
And this is it. So, my daughter is blind, but I want to get her into Dungeons and Dragons. So, little deep dive. We talked about Dungeons and Dragons. We have a whole Geek Dive episode where I go into a lot of like the explanation of what it is. I'm not going to do that in this episode. So listen to episode 4 of Sheltered Sages if you want more of a like deep dive into Dungeons and Dragons. But for this episode, the father wants to get his daughter into playing the tabletop role-playing game.
Cool.
So this was posted on Best of Redditor updates, so it has a lot of like the updates and comments and things like that, and it's super wholesome. I love it. It actually is given the quote unquote mood spoiler of one great dad is the spoiler mood spoiler.
That's fair.
So after a really bad dad, I feel like we should have a really great dad.
Yeah.
So yeah, they asked the question, and they basically says she has the best imagination, but she has been against actually rolling dice. What's the best way to get her involved in it? Sorry if this is fairly vague. I've played the game on and off for decades. Some relevant comments, people were suggesting bump pit dice, which is a thing where it's basically like the feeling of it is a lot more tactile.
Yeah.
They also said that there are like apps or things like that where she could roll the dice in the app, make the announcement.
That's fair.
The dad replied that she's great with tactile stuff and theater of the mind, so maybe making her be able to roll to feel it, etc. would be better. Someone also suggested like Alexa voice apps, things like that, and the father also agreed that was a great idea because she loves asking Alexa for songs, so I might do it for dice. Everyone has had great suggestions.
How old is she?
She is 10. 10 years old.
So sweet.
Yes. So as a DM, 10 years old is a very young age to start playing D&D. That's actually the age limit that I put for my kiddos at my after school program to learn. Though I do have a few kids who are under the age of 10, but they are like so eager to play D&D that I'm like, your eagerness to play will supersede the limit that I have on it. But that being said, so my first update, my daughter is 10 and blind, but she loves theater of the mind, period. I had the starter set already. I had read over Minds of Phandelver, which is the kind of the game that we're playing for our Brunch and Brawl.
Nice.
Over and over again, and I'd also watched a ton of YouTube videos on how to run games for kids. I simplified everything into be able to picking 4 basic races: human, elf, dwarf, gnome, and classes: fighter, ranger, sorcerer, and druid. Perfect. She immediately picked human druid and knew what she wanted to do with her character. It was very surprising because I thought I would have to guide her through things or prod her in certain directions. Nope. She just kept going hard on how she used to be a villager and her dad was a ranger and her mom was a witch. But she spent most of her time in the forest. She could speak with animals, especially birds and monkeys, ? Then dragons, goblins, orcs, and orangutans, which are quote unquote apparently evil. I think they watched or they listened to the Jungle Book a little bit too much.
Okay, but also like he's surprised that this kid was able to do this. If you've met any kids who are really big into like playing with their toys,
yes,
some of those stories go so deep.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like it's hard because nowadays you have two kinds of kids. You have the kids who are like great with their imagination and use it all the time, or you have kids that are and I'm not going to get into iPad kids and things like that in this talk, but you have kids who are glued to their iPads who struggle to have imagination.
Yep.
And so that might have been where he was coming from with that.
Yeah.
So he was saying, then dragons, goblins, orcs, and orangutans, which are apparently evil, attacked their village in the enchanted forest.
Oh no.
It's a wholesome story about like, I'm not going to read through the whole adventure that they have, but we should try and remember to post this one in the comments because it's such a wholesome story about like the story that the daughter told, and like he pretty much basically, long story short, he was planning on doing Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Yep.
And completely scrapped that idea. And they ended up playing with her, just doing it normally. He had her roll some D20s, which are like the 20-sided dice and stuff, and just told her what it was, and she laughed and explained what she did. So it's just like he made that whole story, instead of it being like we're going to try and force this to play this way and do it this way. He just like, it was a great moment where he got to do which at the end of the day is what D&D is for.
That's true.
Cooperative storytelling, and especially with kiddos, which is like one of the things that like, because my wife and I are moving in the direction of potentially having kids, and like that is one of the things I'm really excited for. When we have kids, is that I'm going to be able to play D&D. I also have a niece, and she is also going to play D&D. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law, if y'all are listening, I will get her into Dungeons and Dragons. It has been decided. She will play with Uncle Doo-Doo. So it's really sweet. So some comments that people said after that, they were like, this sounds like an absolute joy. It's very heartwarming to hear how creatively involved your daughter is. She seems very bright, and you sound like an excellent father and dungeon master.
Aww.
Yeah. OP replied, I've played a lot of D&D, and this has been my most fun session. It was hard to navigate for me because I wanted to put in more rules, but I just stopped trying to control it after about 20 minutes. I'm sure most DMs wish they had players that just go on full-blown stories about what they're doing. I'm just hoping she's still interested in what happens next. Someone else replied, I played at a convention with a blind DM. He actually had an electric braille reading machine and was a blast to play with. It was an official D&D event as well. Give it a few years and she'll be DMing for you and your friends.
That's fair.
And the OP replied, gosh, I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
She already's taken over half the NPCs. We always went on adventures, quote unquote, when she was young, which was just walking around pretending. Which really, honestly, at the base of what D&D is, it is that.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like too when he was explaining her little worlds and things like that. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a parent that was very involved in their child's upbringing and encouraged their creativity to the point that they grew and became that. Do you have more of that?
No, so that's the end. But there are 8 paragraphs I didn't read.
Gotcha.
That were like the adventure that she created with her dad. And it's so sweet. And I just love that like the dad took his time to like share something that he was passionate about with her.
Yeah.
So I thought we should end on a wholesome note in that regard.
I will say in that very, very similar vein, I love when parents take something that they are excited about, not necessarily like, in Disney Channel movies where you have the parent who really wants their kid to do football or basketball or something like that and like force them into it. But when it's something that actually the kid likes to do, that they can kind of cross over with the parents and enjoy. My dad, he was really big in fixing computers, and I appreciate him for showing me how, because I was always interested in it too. And so I remember when I was really small, just like he would go over and fix our home computer, and he would let me go over and put the floppy disk into it. I'm aging myself, and make sure that like the software was loaded properly and things like that. But it was a really cool point where we could kind of connect over it. He knew far more than I ever will about computers. But it was also a time where I could hang out with my dad and also like we could do something together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I also said the accented dad again.
From our last episode.
Yeah. But that's wonderful. Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I wanted to end it on that more wholesome story and that's the thing is like, and I'll be honest, as a kid, there are good times that I remember where we did like big events, but a lot of the things that I remember were those smaller moments.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things like you watch shows like Bluey, which my wife and I are obsessed over. Like if you have not watched Bluey, go watch Bluey.
It's a pretty good show.
It's so wholesome, and it's a great example of like what little things you can do can make huge impacts in kids' lives.
Absolutely.
And so that would be my encouragement, whether you are a parent of like really young kids and you're just starting out and you're just trying to figure it out one step at a time. We are there with you. We get it. It's hard. I will probably be there in some fashion in the future. Even just parenting a niece, it's a lot. I say parenting, helping parent a niece is a lot. But just being real with them and trying to treat them in a way that you would want to be treated at the same time.
Absolutely. I would say too, parents are people.
Yeah.
Parents go through a lot. They struggle sometimes. Like you said, we respect you. We appreciate you for trying. Be a parent that tries though.
Yeah.
Regardless of what goes on, try to be open. Try to connect with them. Try to be honest with your kids. And if you're a kid with a parent that might be a little more complicated, Godspeed to you, first of all, because it can be difficult. It sometimes can get into toxic situations, but know that we are respecting you for your attempts and also try to respect them because remember, they are people as well.
Again, I think an ending note on that part too, if you are a child who is in a household with what you have identified as a toxic parent and getting out is not a possibility for you because those environments do exist. Recognize that you are not the problem. First and foremost, it is not your fault that they are acting this way. You are not responsible for that. And you are someone who deserves to be loved, deserves to be respected, and deserves to have someone care about you and not try and use you for whatever mental game that it is that they're playing.
Absolutely.
I feel for you, and I would encourage you to try and find adults in your life, especially if it's an abusive situation,
absolutely, that
you can talk to and that will try and help you in those moments, because there are amazing people out there. And that's the other thing I would say. If you're in a household with toxic adults, try and find a family who is going to be there for you, who is going to be willing to help you and be friends with you. It's a really hard situation. There's you can't really give general advice to those things, but be open about your situation and what you're going through, and there will be people who can help. If you're in school, there are guidance counselors and things like that. If you're homeschooled and you're at anything with co-ops, or if you're in actively involved in a religious environment or things like that, whether you're going to church or any other places that you would go to worship, talk to an adult that you trust.
Yeah, and we'll try to leave some links down below to potentially some resources that you could look into if you're on here and you really want to learn more about it. There'll be some things down there that potentially will help out. Yeah. But for those parents that are doing a great job, continue doing a great job.
Keep doing a good job. Y'all are doing great.
We respect you.
If you, as a parent, if you ever sit there and are like, am I doing, you're trying and am I doing enough? You're doing a lot.
You're doing a lot.
That means a lot.
Yes.
If you ever can think about it and be like, am I doing enough for my child? You're probably doing a lot more than you even realize.
Absolutely.
It's the moment where you're like, I'm a great parent, I don't need to do anything else. It's the same thing of at any point in time, if we say we don't need to learn anything else, that's the moment we've plateaued. Yeah. Because it's you always have something more to learn. You always have more areas that you can grow in.
The more I learn, the more I realize how little I actually know.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So keep doing your best. To my parents out there, also to my parents out there, if you're listening, I love you guys.
Yeah.
I don't think I dragged them through the dirt.
No.
Yeah.
It was a good episode.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening. Thank you for going along with this journey. Also, we have socials.
Yes. So if you want to follow us, if you're watching on YouTube, you can click that little subscribe button and the little bell next to it. We'll let you know whenever we have new episodes up.
No.
If you if you listen on Spotify, Apple Play, Apple Podcasts?
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. Apple Play is the game store, the app store, right?
Yeah, it is. Apple Arcade.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, Apple Podcast, there's ways to follow when you can get alerted when new episodes are. And please don't hesitate to leave us a rating, 5 stars if you love us. 3 stars if you hate us. Still give us a positive rating. Yeah. But leave comments. We'd love to interact with you all, hear your thoughts and opinions on these things. And a lot of these conversations can be very controversial in ways. So if you have differing opinions on that, please feel free to share those with us.
Yeah.
Whether leaving a comment in the YouTube or on the Spotify or wherever it is that you watched.
Yeah. And also, we have an email address that we're also going to link below, that if you have your own stories that you would like us to go over and read and kind of decide who is the picklefoot in those situations. We cannot promise that we will have every single story on this show.
Absolutely.
But we will definitely try to read as many as possible and potentially respond to you on what we think is the picklefoot. But please let us know. Give us some complicated ones. Give us some fun ones. Give us some interesting ones. Give us some stories from your own life. We would love to hear about who you think is the picklefoot, and then also see if it aligns with us.
Yeah, absolutely. We're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah.
as we've said, as adults, we can be wrong.
We can be wrong. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here and talking through these things.
I mean, this is my house, so thank you for being here.
Also, thank you to my parents for being wonderful parents. I love you so much.
Thank you to my parents for the same thing, and for continuing to indulge my weird intrigues and fun things that I get into. So
absolutely. But thank you all again. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye.